Voices. Being heard is as vital to life as air, water, and food. We may recognize sound, but are we really listening? Are certain voices ignored? The series Four Voices offers the mic to young Black people who share their stories of identity, religion, and spirituality. Introspection, self-reflection, and self-discovery are central to finding one's voice, and life can be a process of exploration to find one's place in the world. Let's listen to Antonio.
I define my sexual identity, well, I'll say it like this. It's an ongoing work in progress. I think when I primarily realized that I was a part of the LGBTQ community, I identified just as gay. Bisexual, then gay. And then as I've gone throughout the last couple of years, I've learned so much about gender and sexuality. I think I like to identify now as queer. Gender non-conforming, no, but just more so as queer because there's so much that you could say about gender, but I've learned a lot, and I think now I would just like to be a queer or person. Yeah, I think for me, growing up in the South, in a Black home, in a predominantly Christian home, and very, very strict, I was afraid to identify within myself wholeheartedly with the identity as a gay or queer or gender non-conforming person, because obviously I've heard all of the things over the course of my life from folks, whether it be church or family or whatever, about those things, and they were not positive messages, they were negative messages. So I would say from my teenage years up until I was about 21, 22, I was identifying as like bisexual. I dated girls and went through that whole process, which is interesting because if I were to go backwards into my like youth, I kind of was dibbling and dabbling in my look. Anyway, I would dress up and play house, and I got caught one time making a wig. That's a whole story. But I was cross-dressing in a sense, I guess, even at 3 and 4 years old. And so I was playing with identity, but that was the innocent, of a child. And so then being raised to know that, oh, that's not okay, that's all these other things negative, it pushed me into saying, okay, well, I'm gonna just be bisexual. And that was more so a DL or secret type bisexuality. And then it moved from 21 probably till about 25, where I was just gay. I was strict, one type of gay. This is my life. I was happy, I was proud to come out, but I was very, very specific about being gay, and I didn't understand the spectrum of LGBTQ. I didn't realize that, my trans folks or my gender non-conforming folks or, other identities valued and mattered, and that I also identified with them as well. As a person, you see yourself as one thing, but you're all these things, in one. And so at about 25 or 26, I started to really understand the spectrum of sexuality, and that gender was a social construct, and I had to unlearn all these things from my mom and dad and church and, life. And so that's why from like 25 to about now, with 27, I've kind of just been more explorative with what gender is for me. I think I still primarily identify as a male and as, a person who has gay behaviors, but there are days where I want to wake up and be, more feminine or have create another wig or, just expressive in my gender, so.
Past experiences in churches and with family resulted in negative messages around identity and self-expression. Learning, as well as unlearning, became part of an ongoing process to value himself and the many gender expressions that exist. Now, as a community advocate, Antonio endeavors to be the mentor he never had.
I would have to say that I'm most proud of the work that I've done with the I Am experience over the last 3 years. I myself have, like I just shared, had so many instances where developing myself as a young black queer or gay or questioning male, there was no one there to be a clear divination or guide or person to show me the way. And I think for me, I really wanted to be that. And so having that opportunity and going into the places where the folks like myself were, to find them and then actually build a relationship that was genuine, and then to actually do the intervention program, all the compartments of, I guess, what I wish I had, I was able to give. And I think for me, that was some of the proudest, the best work that I've been able to do.
What is true? Which Bible interpretation is correct? For Antonio, exploration continued and ultimately meant rejecting traditional beliefs about the Bible that exclude certain people. No matter what happens now, his relationship with God is firm.
I come from a very spiritual background. My family comes from a devout Seventh-day Adventist background, and so I had one mindset of who I was supposed to be and what I thought spirituality and Christianity was. And then I kind of, as I started to come out and really understand myself more, realized that I was being taught indoctrination. I was being given a way of life through the eyes and through the voices of other people. And so I began my journey of unlearning some of what seemingly really is not necessarily fact. You used to think as a child, oh, my mom said that the Bible said this, so it's true. Or that, certain person said that, so it's true. But I had to realize that some of these things that are quote unquote indoctrines or truth are opinions from people who walk and talk and breathe and look just like myself. So I had to kind of unlearn that and get into a spiritual experience for myself. And then from probably about 21, like around the same age that I started to kind of transition with my sexuality again, I started to really unlearn the traditionalism of spirituality and began to kind of get in touch with just nature and being open to understanding what other people's practices are, and just knowing that, there's a bigger picture than just one pigeonhole belief system. There's practices from thousands of years before, Christianity even existed. And so how do you ingest all of that and make it applicable to you? I wake up in the morning because God woke me up, and knowing that if I have that relationship with God and that I'm the one checking in with God and not worried about what other people or persons or groups of people have to say, I'm on the right track.
Now Antonio has much more clarity. He offers advice for families and parents with children like him. His counsel is steeped in a message of unconditional love and acceptance.
There are several things that I'm sure, think of that I would love for them to have said to me growing up, but one of the biggest things is that I would like to have heard them say, I am okay and I am enough, and that they do accept me. As a child, it's hard to decipher between the concept that a lot of Christians carry, which is love the sinner, hate the sin, is what I've heard so many times. So I didn't understand what that meant. I just knew whatever actions or thoughts that I did that pertained to my sexuality brought bad results. So I wish, I guess, if anything, they would have just been able to say, we don't understand you, because that's really what it is, but we love you and we accept you. I accept you for who you are. The biggest phrase that I would always hear was, like I said, love the sinner, hate the sin, but also, I can never accept your lifestyle. And so just that acceptance piece would be something that I wish I could have heard from an earlier age, because I think I would have accepted myself a lot sooner and made less hard decisions along the way.
Phrases like love the sinner and hate the sin are no longer enough. Just as Antonio strives to love himself and other people, he knows firsthand what it feels like to be different and to be treated differently. And for many Black young people like him, academic concepts like intersectionality come alive every day.
I was having a debate or conversation with my brother, and one of the things that we were talking about, because as I said, I've just recently started to come to terms with talking to my family openly and honestly about who I am and, just my ideologies on life. My brother is a pastor or a minister, and we were having a conversation about, he said he knew what it felt like to be a minority and or to be a group that is marginalized. When we think about marginalized groups, we don't just think about the minority aspect, but we think about other things that are coupled with the minority aspect that create margins. Black women, Black gay and or LGBTQ folks. And so I was trying to explain to him that there are different layers and or levels of barriers that come along with these marginalized groups. He didn't quite get that because in his mind, he's been taught his whole life he is the target, he is the enemy as a Black man. But I had to get him to kind of break past that and go a little deeper to understand, Rodney, I too am a Black man. I'm not saying I'm not a Black man. Just because I am identifying as a queer or gay person doesn't take away the fact that I'm Black. I said, but guess what that does now? That's what you call a double minority or a double negative in some people's eyes. I said, so systemically, society, whatever, I'm gonna be looked at as, okay, not only is this person Black, they're Black and they're gay. This is what they think about this specific group of people. And so there's, stereotypes for all different groups of people. I said, so there are layers, or as we say, there are levels to this. And I know it's not an oppression Olympics, right? We don't ever want to create the illusion of an oppression Olympics because any oppressed person is wrong. But that was an example of how I had to go a little further with explanation to let him understand that we are multifaceted with different layers of what we would consider barriers.
Antonio realizes that no one is competing to be the most oppressed. Sadly, there is plenty of oppression to go around. But what can be done to change this reality?
Trying to check yourself before you step into that space with that person and say, okay, have I taken my homophobia pill for the day, or have I swallowed my pride for the day, or have I acknowledged the human in this person, before I go into the scenario looking at their transness or looking at their queerness or their Black or their gayness or whatever. So yeah, definitely checking yourself at the door. Also, safe space. The biggest thing that I can say is creating a safe space for your folks, because more importantly now, mental health, as we're in this pandemic and as we've seen, folks are out here struggling. There's a very, very small space for safety anymore. And so if we can create a safe space in all capacities, whether it's casual conversation or if we're having what we consider a brave space conversation, which is a direct conversation, it still needs to remain safe. And then lastly, allow that person to direct the narrative of their identity. So many times we think we have a preconceived notion about what someone is or who they want to be called or how they want to be identified. I recently had a conversation with somebody about this. How you gonna tell me my identity? And it kind of clicked in their head like, oh, I am kind of telling a person who they are. You have to give people space to actually direct that narrative.
Antonio challenges Black churches to expand their definition of community. This advice seems simple, but it is at the heart of the divide in many religious spaces. They can, but will churches embrace the LGBTQIA community? Jesus Christ is the model.
So I definitely feel that in response to the Black church and or communities of faith, the biggest thing is availability. You preach and or say from the pulpits, at least, or places that you have your messages. We want to reach the communities, go ye therefore, teach all nations, and so then shall the Son of Man come, all these other things, that they say. But are you actually available? Are you actually in the streets? When we think about Jesus, who is the Godhead of the Christian church, his mission, his main parts of his life that were considered the most powerful parts were the 3 years of his ministry, where he was nonstop moving, touching folks' lives. And so if we can actually recreate that atmosphere or environment from a perspective of beyond just the communities that you're comfortable with, the poor people or the Black community or the political community, we can go a little deeper and literally go next door or across the street to the LGBTQ Black folks who are also probably somewhat homeless and some dealing with addiction and all these other things. If we can get that barrier down, then the actions of actually creating a relationship, fostering a relationship could be possible. I also think there has to be a open statement, an open and affirming open statement to the community that it is in and serving that states there is a place that is safe for folks of this, as the church likes to say, lifestyle. But it has to be open. I don't think, if we talk about, again, Jesus' ministry, I don't think Jesus was quiet about who he was serving. He told people the sick are the ones that need to go to church or to the doctor, or the hurt need to be healed. You have to be overt about whatever target population you're trying to get at. And so I think if the church wants to do a better job at connecting the dots, they have to take a stance and make a statement.
Just as the Black church must acknowledge diversity inside its walls, diversity exists within social movements. And just as there is more work to do to foster love and empathy in society, more work is needed in the Black community to listen to diverse voices.
So I think the Black Lives Matter movement is pushing a conversation and or narratives that are so far behind as it pertains to the negligence specifically in the Black community with identifying and accepting the LGBTQ community within itself. I had this conversation with someone who was at the March on 100 a couple weeks ago in Washington, and he was saying he was holding up a sign that didn't just say Black Lives Matter, but it said all Black Lives Matter. And there was a controversy of, well, that's very similar to the All Lives Matter statement or what have you. But no, it delved a little deeper into that word that we use in our programming, intersectionality, amongst our population of Black, gay folks or queer or LGBTQ folks. We matter. There are so many untold stories of LGBTQ folks of color who have also been murdered innocently, unarmed, and in the same time frames and capacities, if not, when we talk about Black trans women, in greater capacities even than the Black men who are being highlighted and being visualized and all these other things. So until the Black community specifically can identify that we have a work to do within ourselves before we can actually reach out to other cultures and groups of people to help us, I think we'll struggle with that. But the good thing about the Black Lives Matter movement is that it's brought light to that, right? We're starting to see. I smiled. I recently took a trip to the West Coast, and I was able to see the big mural that's in the street that says Black Lives, but they've changed it to All Lives Matter, mainly because it does reflect the even deeper root of issue, which is that all lives, but specifically the lives that are being targeted right now of color, matter.
Antonio continues to self-reflect. He realizes the power of authentic representation, education, and exposure to the beauty and diversity.
I think that I am finding my peace. You have to kind of go up and down and around to get to the end of the course. In no way, in no shape am I at the end of my course. I got a lot of life left to live, but I do find, and I am finding that the rhythm starts to become easier as you do it continuously. For me, stepping stones have been set over the last couple of years, and I think now, going into my next chapter, I can clearly see the work I have to do. We do have, thankfully, as a LGBTQ community in general, some representation of more than just one type of queer or gay or whatever type person, but specifically folks of color have struggled because we don't have that representation. And the representation that we do have is that catty, snarky, shady, Paris is burning type momentum when it comes to that attitude. And so all of that to me can be combated with continued education, intervention, once we got it kind of a wider spectrum. I'm meeting other MSMs or LGBTQ folks like myself who aren't just one type of person. There are doctors, or there are people who are training to be musicians, or people who are into this or that. You see a bigger spectrum, and so.
A seemingly simple observation about trauma underscores the many negative experiences and complex defense mechanisms used to shield against it.
And one of the things that we have to realize is that hurt people, right? And that in every groups of people and every social circle, there will be those individuals who have been hurt and that do carry those emotions and things, and they manifest and they are, presented in different ways. I think a lot of those individuals that are that way naturally by way of just spirit have been through things to put them in that perspective or put them in that position. Like, I can speak for myself. I'm a very outgoing, bubbly, lovely type of person, but there was a time in my life when I was very depressed and I was very sad. And a lot of what I was putting out a lot of the time was that sharp, snarky, attitudinal, diva-esque type of LGBTQ personality, mainly because I was hurt. And that was the easiest way to defend myself, right? Nobody would bother me if I carried a certain attitude or persona as that, sorry, I don't want to use that word, but as that, or the queen, had that type of fierceness in me, then I was left alone. And so I think sometimes people use it as a defense mechanism. Obviously, it takes unlearning.
Forgiveness, in its many forms, is needed.
Forgive yourself. Forgive yourself, but forgive others. Forgiveness is a key component to the healing process and that kind of potion that it takes to actually become that, LGBTQ folk or person that we are talking about, that we're striving to be when it comes to representation. I had to forgive myself for the things that I thought I did, wrong as a child. All the things that I was told that were negative or bad about myself. I finally said, you are okay. You are enough. There was nothing wrong with you. You can let it go. And then also forgiving the others around me. I was able to through counseling. I suggest to anyone, go to counseling. I'm not a counselor. Your mom is not a counselor. Go actually seek out professional help because it is important to know that you have someone who's trained in helping you deal with all these emotions, because as you open up books of your life that you may not have had open for a long time, emotions flow, things come out. And so, but go to counseling, get that opportunity to talk it out and forgive others, because that within itself gave me the chance to say, I can move on, I can heal, I can grow into the person that I want to be, right? But until you are at that state in your life and until you've forgiven those who've tried to do all that to you over the years, you will never see the clarity that comes along with that. So that's a huge thing, forgiveness.
Is there a balm in Gilead that can heal people today?
In my experience, I would have to say we have a hard time combating the stigma and a hard time combating all the negative things that come along with actually being in care or treatment or actually being in the know or the knowledge of. A lot of times People want to know. People want to be informed. They want to be in care, but they're afraid of what comes along with that image. So we're still combating systemic and societal issues that go beyond health or education. If you could actually feel comfortable coming into a place that is designed for education, that is designed for prevention and all those other things without the stigma, I really believe that we would reach a lot of folks. Also, the normalizing of it. HIV should be normalized. It should be normalized. The flu is normalized. Measles, never had that. That sounds painful, but it's normalized. All these diseases that, once 100 years ago, that was a pandemic and taking people out and all these other scary things that came along with it are now normalized. And we're at that state of science where we can normalize HIV. And it absolutely needs to be normalized to the point where people aren't afraid anymore of that part of interacting with, whether it's a person who has HIV or getting more information on it, or the vaccination trials, all of the things that would help further prevent that number from constantly going up comes from stigma.
The negative effects of stigma are all too real. Self-care, education, and prevention are the pillars of support so many young people need. For Antonio, life is best lived introspectively. He is not perfect, but he is being perfected as he moves through the world, and he welcomes the journey.
The one piece of good advice that I would give someone like myself is to know thyself, to thine own self be true, to give yourself the time to figure that out. I had to learn that seemingly 27 years, it seems like a long time. I feel like I'm tired. I got a lot more to live though, and it's really not that long of a time. Giving yourself the time that it takes to actually grow and develop when you're supposed to. But to know yourself and to be okay with who you are. Learn to accept the things that you cannot change and work on the things that you know you can change. But if you know yourself and you are true to that person, you'll never be wrong. Yeah.
Shakespeare's famous quote from the play Hamlet has become Antonio's mantra: "To thine own self be true." It resonates throughout his life and will continue to do so as he learns, grows, and teaches others to do the same. Not only must Antonio's voice be heard, everything depends on it.